It's day 2 of our sourdough series. It is really early in the morning, so I'm not even feeling fully awake yet. But I wanted to do this and make sure we got day 2 under our belts. So I was looking at the starter. It doesn't smell sour. It really just smells like flour and water. There is no difference, and you won't see much of a difference within a day or even 2 days at some point. I'm gonna pour this out into a small bowl, and then we'll take away half and then feed it. And the reason I'm gonna pour it out is because I really want you to be able to see it. And then when all of that's done, I'm actually gonna feed Giuseppe so you can actually see what it looks like and what it should look like over a 5 to 7 day period is probably how long it's gonna take to really build your starter up. So let's dump this out. So I'm gonna put it into this purple bowl here. And again, you don't have to do this. I am doing this just so it's a little bit easier for you to see. Okay. So you might notice that the consistency or the texture, it did kinda, I mean, it was very pasty and thick before. It has loosened up a little bit. So all I'm gonna do is just take half away. And if you were to keep it in your jar, right, this is what you're doing. Just taking half away. And you do this, as I had mentioned yesterday, for a variety of reasons. Mainly because you want to make sure you're not overwhelming, right? If I were to keep all of this in, I would have to add a much larger ratio of flour and water, which if you don't have enough food in there for the yeast, right? And if you do add enough in, eventually your sourdough just gets so big, it's uncontrollable. So you always want to just take half away. And I'll talk more about the discard at another time. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and weigh this. I'm not even weighing what I have in there. I'm just gonna put in probably 50 to 60 grams of each water and flour. Yeah, I'm gonna do 50. Now I'm using all-purpose flour, as we had spoke about yesterday. You can start with a rye or a wheat flour, and I'm adding 50 grams of water in, guys, right? 1-to-1 ratio. If you have bread flour on hand, you can use that as well. I'm recommending to start with all-purpose because I have just found that is the easiest and fastest way to get a good healthy starter going. And then over time, you can feed your starter different flours, and you'll notice as you get more accustomed to it, what flours will generate a quicker, rise, a quicker double of yeast or starter, and which ones may take a little bit longer. But really, I use mainly either freshly milled flour if I have any left over of whole wheat, or just all-purpose. I try not to get too fancy and too complicated with it. So I'm just mixing this in. I did 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water. And then I'm just gonna put it back in my jar. Now, I also want to mention for the water, I try not to use tap water. If you have used it, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay. I try to use filtered water from our refrigerator just because of the chlorine. Sometimes the chlorine can inhibit the growth as well. If you don't have a method to get filtered water, then just put some water in a measuring cup and leave it sit on the counter overnight, and the chlorine will actually dissipate. And then you can use it the next day. All right, so everything is in. So I'm just gonna put my fabric and ring back on and leave it sit on the counter. So you want to make sure you're leaving it on the counter at room temperature. Anywhere between 60 to 75 degrees is optimal. And I have it right over there if you can see it. And I'm just leaving it there. So you may start to see bubbles over the next 24 hours, but again, we'll check it tomorrow for day 3 and see if it looks any different. I'm gonna go ahead and feed Giuseppe, my very active, mature starter, and kind of show you how I do that and what I do with the discard. So I have a container that I keep in the refrigerator. This is the discard. So whenever I'm feeding Giuseppe, I take a little bit away and I put it in here, and I just store this in the refrigerator. And usually when it gets all the way to the top, then I'll do something with it. So you'll hear about discard, sourdough discard, and that's what it is. You're just taking part of it away and discarding it and then feeding your starter again. Again, 2 reasons you do this. Number 1, you want to make sure you're keeping your ratios in check. Otherwise, your starter will just take over your house. It will just keep getting bigger. If you don't take some away, it just keeps growing. And also by taking some away, you're reducing the amount of waste of the flour that you're needing, right? So I'm only feeding maybe between 50 to 75 grams of flour, whereas if I didn't take any more away here, I'd have to keep growing it, right? Keep putting more in so that the yeast have enough food to feed on, which means I'd need a bigger vessel and so forth. And you just don't want to keep that up. So I discard into here. And so every week or 2 weeks, however long it takes to get a full container here, then I'll go ahead and I'll make sourdough pancakes, sourdough waffles. There are a ton of discard, they're called discard recipes online, and you'll be able to find a lot of them, things that you will really look forward to making. So I save my discard, don't throw it away. The other thing you want to save your discard for is its insurance. For some reason, you mess up your starter, whatever the case may be, you're just not paying attention and you do something, you put something in it that you shouldn't. Baking soda, maybe you think this is your dough, right? And you're mixing something up and you put your ingredients, your salt and your baking soda or baking powder in here. That will mess it up. You have some more mature starter to go ahead and get going again. So it's also an insurance policy that I like to have. So we're gonna take half a Giuseppe away, and you'll see I'll pour it in here, but I want you to see kind of how easily it flows. You'll see some of the bubbles. That's good. I don't know if you can see that in there. Just gonna, well, I'm not even gonna dirty my spoon up yet. I'm just gonna do this first, and then I'll mix it all up and push that down off the edge. So I'm making sourdough pizza crust tonight for dinner. So I think I'm gonna go 75. I need this to get really big and healthy. So we're gonna go to 150 now with the water. And if you get off by a couple of grams, do not fret. Don't worry about it. The more you do this, the more you'll understand like the different texture and like what it should smell like, what it should look like. And really, starter is very resilient. So if you feel like you've done something wrong, just take a breath, take a step back, and reassess, and I promise you can probably save it. Sourdough starter is pretty resilient to just about anything. Okay, so I've got that thoroughly mixed, and I like to just clean down the sides. That's part of my OCD, as well as I really like to be able to see the sides, right? So I know where to put my line, and usually where rubber band doesn't change too much from time to time, but now I've got that ready. So now I'm gonna leave Giuseppe over on the stove. I boiled some water for coffee earlier, so the stove is not burning, right? It's not at a really high temp, but it's warm. And so I'm just gonna go put this on the stove to help rise, and hopefully this shall double. That's it for day 2. We've got our new starter there, and we'll come back on day 3 and see how it looks then. See you tomorrow.